Jason Archer here from Abacus Bio, and I've got Andrew Cromie with me on the link to answer some questions live. So good morning to you, Andrew.
Thank you, and good evening to you, Jason.
Yeah. So that was a really interesting clip that we just watched, and some of the things that we talked about when we recorded that interview. We've just got a question in here from Mark Murphy. I think starting out in stud breeding and saying that he's doing tissue samples on all of his calves this year. What would you recommend as the next step?
Okay, so I mean, obviously, if he's tissue sampling the calves, and I'm assuming then he's a stud breeder, he's Angus or Hereford or one of the breeds, and obviously those tissue samples and genotypes are being generated and going into the breed plan single step evaluation for the breeds. I think you know, if you talk about next steps, it's actually very much consistent with the theme of the conference, which is really around well, what traits are we currently not collecting data on and getting genomic evaluations that'll let Matt Murphy, that young stud breeder, you know, breed the next generation of bulls that are going to help drive the New Zealand beef industry. And you know, everything that we see globally at this point is, and whether that's in Europe or the US, or whether you're in Australia, New Zealand, is, you know, our cows have got too big. Our purebred cows that are generating the bulls, we have a disconnect there, focused on output and terminal traits. So starting to look at these maternal traits akin to what we have obviously, you know, had to do in Ireland, has to be really the starting point for Matt, and that's obviously a wider industry conversation as well.
Give up recording then.
Yeah, absolutely.
Keep recording. Another question here from Brian Bendel. Good evening, Brian. What are ICBF doing in the meat quality space? So we've talked a fair bit about you know, cow maternal ability and all that sort of thing. What about meat quality?
Well, this is an area that really excites us because you know, there's a lot of genetic variation in these meat eating quality traits, and obviously you know, again globally, that opportunity has been captured by the brands, the big brands, Angus and Hereford. And yet, whenever you look within these breeds and look at other breeds, there really is lots of genetic variation in tenderness and juiciness and flavour and overall liking. So we have a major industry-funded project at the moment where we're actually collecting, again, DNA samples and meat eating quality data and boning out data, carcass cut data on about 8,000 animals. And we're about halfway through that work, and we will have test EBVs for meat eating quality traits at the end of this year, which we would then start to see us incorporating into our economic indexes, our Eurostar replacement and maternal index. The early work on that, and we've done some really nice validation on it, is really good, you know, and even right through to consumers, that whenever we test the high versus low EBV animals in a blind validation study, they can really pick up the differences. And that's a big opportunity that there is in this whole meat eating quality space, because you know, when that consumer has a bad piece of beef, regardless of whether in New Zealand or Australia or in Europe or North America, I mean, they're turned off beef, you know. So this is a really important area that I think there's an opportunity for a lot of really good global collaboration between organizations to really address this particular issue.
And so in Ireland, do you have any payment systems that reward meat quality or eating quality? Are the people getting rewarded?
That is certainly the next piece of that discussion. Currently we have our branded schemes, so different to yourselves or in North America, and obviously there is a reward there, cents per kilo reward there for Angus and Hereford, also to a certain extent a bit of Shorthorn. But what we want to see that translated into is actually that the reward is going to come on the back of a genomic evaluation for meat eating quality, and that the meat processor then would return on commercial animals being slaughtered, would effectively then be returning an additional payment based on the meat eating quality attributes of the animals slaughtered.
Excellent. That sounds really exciting. So, Andrew, You talked at the start of the interview about the improvements that you're making and the breeds that you've been using, and I must admit, you know, I've had a very small exposure to your industry, but you've got some breeds over there that you had been using, I guess, across your dairy cows and as suckler cow replacements that in New Zealand we tend to think of as our terminal size. So is the improvement that you're observing, and you know, it was quite spectacular, that graph that you showed us, is that coming from selecting better bulls within a breed, or is it coming from substituting terminal type sire breeds for more maternal breeds?
I mean, the irony, and this is probably what has got us into most of the trouble. Most trouble, like if I look at the implementation, I'm going to say most trouble with our, you know, the bull breeders and the breed societies is it's actually, it hasn't been on breed substitution as such. You see, it's actually been on we're changing the type of animal that's coming to the top of the within breed rankings, right. And that's causing a real level of angst for them, whether you're a Limousin breeder or a Charolais breeder or a Simmental or an Angus or a Hereford. The animals that are coming up on the top of the index now are these more maternal bulls, which, you know, some breeders don't like the look of. They're not as big, they're not as muscly, they don't put on the same weight gain and conformation and all that. So, and of course, traditionally, bull breeding and showing and that part of the business has all been focused around those visual traits that you can see, but you can't see calving, you can't see fertility, you can't see milk, and these are the traits that obviously the genomics program is now rewarding and pushing those sorts of bulls up to the top of the list. So so that has caused, you know, if I was to say, the internal angst around in Ireland, you know, around the program, but importantly, the better bull breeders are responding because they are the bulls that the commercial suckler farmers want and need. Yeah. And that's really what's driving the genetic gain. So it's actually not it's not the breed substitution, but it's re-ranking within the breed to identify those good all-round maternal and terminal bulls.
Yeah, it reminds me, I once heard a sheep breeder said something about learning to like the look of the animals that make them the most money. So I think that's what you're saying. Just another question that's come in. So a lot of the genomics that we have over in our part of the world are within breed genomics, and that's the way things seem to be working best for us. But you've got a big genomic program with lots of breeds in there. We've got 1 minute of this question session left. Does it work across breeds?
It does work across breeds. I mean, we have the benefit of having a very well connected population here in Ireland with lots of commercial suckler animals that are truly crossbred. I would say that, you know, it would be important in whatever you do in New Zealand there to try and build the integrated structures that allow the crossbred data be part of the genetic evaluation system. Because I know that historically it's obviously been based on you know, within breed improvement programs. So anything that you can do through central progeny testing programs, etc., to get the crossbred data, because that's how you then get the crossbreed and those crossbreed predictions working better.
Right. So I'm getting the wind up here, Andrew. So thank you very much for coming on tonight and answering some questions for us and for doing the interview in the first place.